The blood on Martha's hands wasn't from childbirth this time. Sheriff Coleman lay motionless on her kitchen floor, his badge reflecting the lamplight like a dying star. 3 stillborn sons, 2 miscarriages, and now this. The town of Copper Ridge had branded her cursed, whispered she was poison to any man who touched her. But Coleman had forced his way in, drunk and demanding what he claimed was owed to him for protecting a barren woman. The cast-iron skillet had connected with his skull before she'd even realized she'd swung it. Outside, hoofbeats approached. Martha wiped her bloodied palms on her apron, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the window, she saw a lone rider dismounting, tall, weathered, with the distinctive long black hair of an Apache. She'd seen him in town before, trading pelts and keeping to himself. What was he doing here at this hour? "Ma'am?" His voice carried through the door, respectful but firm. "I heard shouting. Everything all right in there?" Martha's throat constricted. If he saw Coleman's body, if word spread that she'd killed the sheriff, the townspeople would string her up before dawn. They'd been looking for an excuse to rid themselves of the cursed widow anyway. "I'm fine," she called back, her voice cracking like dry timber. "No, ma'am, you're not." The door creaked open slowly. The Apache stepped inside, his dark eyes immediately finding Coleman's still form. For a long moment, he studied the scene, the overturned chair, the blood, Martha's trembling hands. How long ago? Just now? He tried to. Martha couldn't finish the sentence. The Apache knelt beside Coleman, checking for a pulse with practiced efficiency. "He's alive. Barely." He looked up at Martha with eyes that held no judgment, only calculation. "You got maybe 10 minutes before he comes around, less if you're unlucky." "I didn't mean to." "Doesn't matter what you meant." He stood, wiping his hands on his leather vest. "Matters what happens next. You got family? Somewhere to run?" Martha shook her head. "Nobody, nothing." The Apache was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the flickering lamplight. "Name's Joseph Running Bear. Lost my wife and daughter to fever last winter. Been thinking I need someone to help with the ranch, someone who understands loss." He paused, his gaze steady. "Someone who's got nowhere else to go. You don't know me. Don't know what people say about me. I know you fought back when a man tried to take what wasn't his. I know you're standing here talking instead of running, which means you got spine." Joseph glanced at Coleman again. "And I know if you stay here, you'll be dead by morning." Martha's mind raced. Marriage to an Apache would make her an outcast, even among outcasts. But she was already branded as cursed, already living on borrowed time in a town that wanted her gone. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me?" Joseph's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because I need a wife, not a legacy, and because sometimes the people the world throws away are the only ones worth keeping." Coleman groaned, his fingers twitching against the floorboards. Joseph moved quickly, gathering Martha's few possessions into a canvas bag. "We leave now, or we don't leave at all. Your choice." Martha looked around the small cabin that had been her prison for 3 years since her husband's death. At the bloodstain spreading beneath the man who'd tried to claim her like property. At the Apache stranger offering her something she'd never had. A choice. "I'll come with you." Joseph nodded once, shouldering her bag. "Then we ride hard and don't look back. My ranch is 2 days north, past the territorial line. By the time Coleman wakes up and tells his story, we'll be long gone." As they stepped into the cool night air, Martha felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. It was fragile as spun glass, but it was there. Behind them, Coleman stirred, mumbling incoherently. Ahead lay unknown territory and an uncertain future with a man she barely knew. But for the first time since her first son had been born blue and silent, Martha felt like she might actually have a future at all. Joseph helped her onto his horse, his touch gentle but efficient. "You ever been on Apache land before?" "No." "It's different. Harder in some ways. easier in others. My people, they'll be curious about you. Some might not be welcoming at first. Martha settled behind him on the horse, her arms circling his waist as they began to ride. Will they think I'm cursed too? Apache don't believe in curses the way white folks do. We believe in choices, consequences, and second chances. He urged the horse into a gallop, the town of Copper Ridge shrinking behind them. Besides, any woman who can drop a man Coleman's size with a skillet has got medicine of her own. Despite everything, Martha found herself almost smiling. Medicine, power, strength, call it what you want. Joseph's voice carried over the sound of hoofbeats. Point is, you're not cursed. You're just a woman who's been dealt a bad hand by bad men. They rode through the night, following trails that seemed invisible to Martha but were clearly familiar to Joseph. As dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, they stopped at a creek to rest the horse and drink. Tell me about your wife, Martha said as they sat by the water's edge. Joseph was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke. Her name was Elena. She was Mexican, from a family that traded with my people. Smart as a whip, could track better than most men, and made the best cornbread this side of the Rio Grande. His voice carried a weight of grief that Martha recognized. She wanted children so bad it hurt to watch sometimes. What happened to your daughter? Fever took them both within a week. Little Maria was only 2 years old. Joseph picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in his weathered hands. Elena always said the land was big enough for all kinds of people, all kinds of love. Said it didn't matter what color your skin was, or what language you spoke at home, only what was in your heart. Martha understood why he'd offered to help her. They were both refugees from loss, both carrying wounds that might never fully heal. The townspeople in Copper Ridge, she said carefully. They'll come looking eventually. Let them come. They'll find an empty cabin and a sheriff with a story nobody will believe. A cursed widow disappearing into thin air. They'll probably think it's fitting. As they prepared to continue their journey, Martha caught sight of her reflection in the creek. For the first time in years, she didn't see a cursed woman staring back. She saw someone who'd fought for her life and won. The sun climbed higher as they rode deeper into Apache territory. The landscape changed gradually. Fewer farms, more wild country, red rocks jutting up like ancient monuments. Joseph pointed out landmarks, sharing stories of his childhood, his voice growing more relaxed the farther they traveled from white settlements. That ridge there, he said, indicating a distinctive formation, that's where I learned to hunt. My grandfather took me up there when I was 8 years old, told me the land would teach me everything I needed to know if I learned how to listen. What did it teach you? Patience, respect, that everything is connected. The deer to the grass to the rain to the sky. He glanced back at her. That sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. By afternoon, they reached Joseph's ranch, a modest spread with a sturdy adobe house, a barn and corrals holding a small herd of horses. It was isolated but not lonely, nestled in a valley with a clear stream running through it. It's beautiful, Martha said, and meant it. Elena designed the house, said she wanted something that belonged to the land instead of sitting on top of it. Joseph dismounted and helped Martha down. There's a spare room off the kitchen. You can stay there until we figure out what comes next. That evening, as Martha prepared a simple meal from Joseph's supplies, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Peace. The silence wasn't oppressive like it had been in town, where every quiet moment was filled with whispered judgments. Here, the silence felt clean, full of possibility. You don't have to marry me, she said as they ate by lamplight. I mean, you saved my life. I don't want you to feel obligated. Joseph set down his fork, considering her words. Elena used to say that obligation was just love that hadn't figured itself out yet. He met her eyes across the small table. "I'm not asking you to love me, Martha. I'm asking you to build something with me. See where it leads. If you're enjoying this story of second chances and unexpected hope, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think Martha's new life will bring. Your support helps me create more stories like this one." The next morning brought visitors, 3 Apache men on horseback, their faces serious as they approached the house. Martha's stomach clenched with familiar fear, but Joseph stepped outside calmly, greeting them in their native language. The conversation was brief but intense. Martha caught her name mentioned several times, along with words she didn't understand. Finally, the men rode away, and Joseph returned to the house. What did they want? "Word travels fast out here. They heard about the white woman who came with me." Joseph poured himself coffee, his movements deliberate. "My cousin thinks I'm making a mistake, says white women bring trouble." Maybe he's right. Maybe, but I told him something Elena used to say, that trouble finds you whether you invite it or not. Might as well face it with someone you choose to stand beside. Over the following days, Martha learned the rhythms of ranch life. She helped with the horses, mended fences, and gradually began to understand why Joseph had chosen this isolated place. There was a freedom here she'd never experienced, a sense that she could become whoever she chose to be rather than whoever others expected her to be. But the past has a way of catching up, even in the most remote places. On a Tuesday morning, as Martha hung laundry on the line behind the house, she spotted dust clouds on the horizon. Riders, moving fast and with purpose. Her blood turned to ice water in her veins. "Joseph," she called, her voice carrying across the yard. He emerged from the barn, took one look at the approaching riders, and his expression hardened. "Get in the house. Stay away from the windows." "Is it Coleman? And he brought friends?" Martha's hands shook as she watched Joseph check his rifle. "How many?" "6, maybe 7, more than I can handle alone." He looked at her with steady eyes. "They're not here to talk, Martha. Coleman's got his pride to think about and a story to sell about the cursed widow who tried to kill him. I won't let you die for me, and I won't let them take you." Joseph moved to the window, watching the riders approach. "Eleanor always said that sometimes you have to fight for the right to choose your own life. Today feels like one of those times." The riders stopped just outside rifle range, Coleman's voice carrying across the distance. "Running Bear, send out the woman and we'll leave you be. This doesn't have to involve you." Joseph stepped onto the porch, his rifle visible but not raised. "She's under my protection now, Coleman. You got no authority here." "I got the authority of justice. That woman tried to murder me in cold blood." "Funny thing about justice," Joseph called back. "It tends to look different depending on where you're standing." Martha joined him on the porch, ignoring his sharp look of warning. "I'm here, Coleman. You want to talk? We talk. But you leave him out of it." Coleman's face was still bandaged from their encounter, his eyes burning with humiliation and rage. "You're coming back with me to face trial, and your Apache friend here is going to learn what happens to savages who harbor criminals." "The only criminal I see," Martha said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard, "is a man who forced his way into a woman's home and tried to take what wasn't offered." "You lying?" "Careful, Sheriff," Joseph interrupted. "You're on Apache land now. My word carries weight here, and I saw the bruises on her wrists when she arrived. Saw the fear in her eyes. A jury might be interested in hearing about that." Coleman's hand moved to his gun. "I'm done talking." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Martha could feel the violence building in the air like pressure before a storm. 7 men against 2, with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Then from the ridge above the ranch came the sound of hoofbeats. Lots of them. Joseph's cousin appeared first, followed by a dozen Apache warriors, their faces painted for war. They spread out along the ridge, rifles glinting in the afternoon sun. Coleman's men shifted nervously in their saddles, suddenly outnumbered and outgunned. "Seems like you're the one who's outnumbered now, Sheriff," Joseph said quietly. The tension held for another heartbeat. Then Coleman spat in the dirt and wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over, Running Bear. The territorial governor will hear about this." "Tell him whatever you want," Joseph replied, "but tell him the truth, that you came onto Apache land to kidnap a woman who was under our protection. See how that plays with the folks in Washington who are trying to keep the peace." As Coleman and his men rode away, Martha felt her knees go weak with relief. Joseph's cousin rode down from the ridge, his expression unreadable. The two men spoke in Apache for several minutes before the cousin turned to Martha. In careful English, he said, "Joseph says you have strong medicine, that you fight like Apache woman. I just fought like a woman who had no choice." The cousin nodded slowly. "Sometimes that is the strongest medicine of all." He looked between Martha and Joseph. "You are welcome here, both of you." That evening, as they sat by the fire, Martha finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Why did your cousin come? Why did they help?" Joseph stared into the flames. "Because family protects family, and because Elena was right. The land is big enough for all kinds of love." "Is that what this is? Love?" Joseph was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know yet, but I know it's something worth protecting, something worth building on." He looked at her across the fire. "What do you think?" Martha thought about the woman she'd been in Copper Ridge, afraid, isolated, defined by other people's fears and superstitions. Then she thought about the woman she was becoming, someone who could stand on a porch with a rifle and face down 7 men, someone who belonged somewhere. "I think," she said slowly, "that maybe the curse was never about not being able to bear sons. Maybe it was about not being able to choose my own life. And now I choose this. I choose you. I choose building something new instead of running from something old." Joseph smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Then we'd better get started. Winter's coming and there's a lot of work to do." As autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and crimson, Martha and Joseph were married in a simple ceremony attended by his family and a few neighboring ranchers. There were no white guests, no church bells, no elaborate dress. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their previous lives, promising to build something better together. The territorial governor never did send anyone to investigate Coleman's complaints. The sheriff himself was quietly transferred to a posting in California after rumors began circulating about his conduct with local women. Copper Ridge forgot about its cursed widow, as small towns do when the object of their gossip disappears. Martha learned to speak Apache, to track game through the mountains, to read weather patterns in the sky. Joseph learned to appreciate her cornbread, her stubborn streak, and her ability to gentle the wildest horses with nothing but patience and understanding. They never had children together, but they didn't need them to build a legacy. Their ranch became a stopping point for travelers of all kinds, Apache families moving between seasonal camps, Mexican traders heading north, even the occasional white settler who'd learned to see past the color of skin to the content of character. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the stars painted silver patterns across the desert sky, Martha would sometimes think about the woman she'd been, afraid, alone, convinced she was cursed. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from a story she'd heard long ago. The real curse, she'd learned, had never been about bearing sons or bringing bad luck to men. The real curse had been believing that other people's fear and hatred defined who she was and what she deserved. Breaking that curse hadn't required magic or miracles. It had only required the courage to choose differently, and a man wise enough to see that sometimes the people the world throws away are exactly the ones worth keeping. Years later, when travelers asked about the white woman who'd married the Apache rancher, The stories they heard weren't about curses or tragedy. They were about a woman who'd learned to fight for her own life, and a man who'd understood that love isn't about creating a legacy. It's about creating a home where two broken people can become whole. And if that's not magic, it's something close enough to matter. If this story of courage, love, and second chances moved you, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our powerful tales of human resilience. Drop a comment below, sharing your thoughts about Martha and Joseph's journey. Did their story surprise you? What would you have done in Martha's situation? Your engagement helps us bring more incredible stories to life. So please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who believes in the power of choosing your own destiny. Thank you for being part of our community of storytellers and dreamers. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late spring, carried by a young Mexican boy who'd ridden hard from the territorial capital. Martha's hands trembled as she broke the wax seal, recognizing the official letterhead of the territorial government. "What is it?" Joseph asked, setting down his coffee cup. Martha's face went pale as she read. "It's from the new territorial judge. He's reopening the investigation into Coleman's incident. Says there are new witnesses who've come forward." Joseph took the letter, his jaw tightening as he scanned the formal language. "Says here, you're to appear in Santa Fe within 30 days to answer charges of attempted murder." "But Coleman dropped the matter. He was transferred." "Coleman's dead." The voice came from the doorway where Joseph's cousin David stood, his expression grim. "Shot 3 weeks ago in a saloon fight in California. But before he died, he wrote a confession, said you attacked him without provocation, that he was just doing his duty as sheriff." Martha sank into a chair, the weight of the past crashing back down on her. A confession? But that's not what happened. "Doesn't matter what really happened," David continued. "What matters is Coleman's version is now the official record, and the new judge is looking to make a name for himself by cleaning up territorial justice." Joseph crumpled the letter in his fist. They can do whatever they want. You know that." David's voice was bitter with experience. "Apache word against a dead white sheriff's confession in a territorial court? She'll hang before the sun sets." Martha stood slowly, her mind racing. "Then I run. Disappear into Mexico, start over again. And leave me?" Joseph's voice was quiet, but she heard the pain beneath it. "To save your life, yes. If I stay, if I fight this, they'll come for you too. They'll say you harbored a fugitive, that you're part of some Apache conspiracy against white law." Martha moved to the window, staring out at the land that had become home. "I won't let them destroy what you've built here." "What we've built," Joseph corrected. "And I'm not letting you run alone." "Joseph, no. Your family, your ranch, will still be here when we get back." His voice carried a certainty that made her turn. "Because we are coming back, Martha. We're going to Santa Fe, and we're going to fight this." David shook his head. "You're both crazy. The territorial court isn't going to listen to, maybe not to us," Joseph interrupted, "but they might listen to someone else." That afternoon, Joseph rode out alone, returning near sunset with a woman Martha had never seen before. She was perhaps 40, well-dressed in the manner of wealthy Mexican families, with intelligent dark eyes and silver threading through her black hair. "Martha," Joseph said, helping the woman dismount, "I'd like you to meet Señora Isabella Morales. She owns the largest ranch in the territory, and she has some interesting things to say about our late Sheriff Coleman." Isabella's handshake was firm, her English accented but precise. "Señora Running Bear, I am sorry we meet under such circumstances, but perhaps I can help you understand why certain people want you silenced." Over dinner, Isabella told her story. Coleman was not just a corrupt sheriff. He was part of a land grab scheme, working with territorial officials to drive small ranchers off their property. My husband discovered this before his death last year. Coleman killed him to keep him quiet. Martha's fork clattered against her plate. Killed him? Made it look like an accident, a fall from his horse during a storm. But I found papers in my husband's study afterward, correspondence between Coleman and a territorial judge named Harrison, the same judge who's now calling for your trial. Joseph leaned forward. What kind of correspondence? Plans to claim Apache lands for white settlement, lists of Mexican families to be driven out, and a note about a cursed widow who was asking too many questions about Coleman's activities. Isabella met Martha's eyes. You were never cursed, Senora. You were dangerous. You saw too much, knew too much about Coleman's real business. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Martha remembered now the strange visitors Coleman had brought to town, the families who'd suddenly left their ranches, the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. I wasn't barren because I was cursed, Martha whispered. I was targeted because I was asking questions. Coleman needed you isolated, discredited. What better way than to spread rumors about a curse, make the townspeople afraid of you, make you afraid of yourself? Isabella's voice was gentle but firm, but you escaped before he could finish whatever he had planned. David, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. Even if this is all true, how does it help? It's still her word against a dead man's confession. Isabella smiled for the first time since arriving. Because my husband wasn't the only one Coleman killed, and unlike him, the others left witnesses. The next morning brought more visitors, a steady stream of people Martha had never expected to see. Mexican ranchers who'd lost their land to mysterious legal challenges. Apache families who'd been forced from traditional hunting grounds. Even a few white settlers who'd refused to participate in Coleman's schemes and paid the price. Each brought pieces of the puzzle, documents, witness accounts, evidence of a conspiracy that reached from small-town sheriffs to territorial judges. By afternoon, Martha's kitchen table was covered with papers that painted a picture of systematic corruption and violence. There's enough here to bring down half the territorial government, said Thomas Mitchell, a white rancher who'd lost his spread to a suspicious fire after refusing to sell to Coleman's associates. But getting it heard in court is another matter entirely. Judge Harrison won't allow any of this as evidence, added Maria Santos, whose family had been driven from their ranch by false debt claims. He's part of the conspiracy. Isabella had been quiet through most of the discussions, but now she stood. Then we don't go to Judge Harrison's court, we go over his head. To who? Martha asked. To Washington, to the federal authorities who are investigating territorial corruption. Isabella's eyes gleamed with something that might have been satisfaction. You see, my late husband wasn't just a rancher. He was also a federal marshal, working undercover to investigate reports of corruption in the territorial government. The room fell silent. Joseph was the first to speak. You're saying the federal government already knows about this? They suspected. Now, thanks to all of you, they have proof. Isabella gathered the papers from the table. I've been in correspondence with the Justice Department for months, waiting for enough evidence to move forward. Your case, Senora Running Bear, was the final piece they needed. Martha felt dizzy with the implications. So I don't have to go to Santa Fe? Oh, you're still going to Santa Fe, but not as a defendant. Isabella's smile was sharp as a blade. You're going as a federal witness. The federal marshals arrived 3 days later, a dozen hard-faced men who treated the conspiracy with the seriousness it deserved. Judge Harrison was arrested in his chambers, along with 2 other territorial officials. Coleman's confession was revealed to be a forgery, written by Harrison himself in a desperate attempt to tie up loose ends. The trial that followed made headlines across the territory. Martha testified not as a cursed widow, but as a key witness in the largest corruption case in territorial history. Her account of Coleman's behavior, combined with the mountain of evidence gathered by Isabella and the other victims, painted a clear picture of a criminal conspiracy that had destroyed dozens of lives. Joseph sat in the courtroom gallery every day, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos of legal proceedings. When Martha's testimony was finished, when the last piece of evidence had been presented, she finally understood what freedom felt like. The federal judge's verdict was swift and comprehensive. Harrison received 20 years in federal prison. Coleman's associates were scattered to the winds, their land-grabbing scheme exposed and dismantled. The families who'd lost their property received compensation and the right to reclaim their homes. But perhaps most importantly, the official record was corrected. Martha Running Bear was not a cursed widow who'd tried to murder a sheriff. She was a brave woman who'd defended herself against a corrupt official and helped expose a conspiracy that had terrorized the territory for years. On the train ride back from Santa Fe, Martha watched the familiar landscape roll past the windows. The red rocks and endless sky looked the same, but everything felt different. She was different. "Regrets?" Joseph asked, taking her hand. "About what?" "About not running to Mexico when you had the chance, about staying to fight." Martha considered the question seriously. The past months had been terrifying, exhausting, and dangerous. There had been moments when she'd been certain they would both end up dead or imprisoned, but there had also been moments of incredible clarity, of understanding exactly who she was and what she was capable of. "No regrets," she said finally. "For the first time in my life, I fought for something instead of running from it. That's worth whatever it cost." Joseph squeezed her hand. "Elena would have liked you." "You think so?" "I know so. She always said the strongest people were the ones who'd been broken and chose to heal instead of staying broken." He looked out the window at the approaching valley that held their ranch. "She would have said you had the strongest medicine of all." When they reached home, they found the ranch exactly as they'd left it. But somehow it felt different too. It wasn't just a refuge anymore, a place to hide from the world. It was home in the truest sense, a place they'd chosen, fought for, and earned the right to keep. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Martha realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for without knowing it. Not just love, though she'd found that too. Not just safety, though the ranch provided that as well. She'd found herself. The real Martha, not the cursed widow or the dangerous witness, or any of the other labels people had tried to pin on her. Just a woman who'd learned that sometimes the most important choice you can make is to stop letting other people define who you are. "What are you thinking about?" Joseph asked. "About curses," Martha said. "About how the worst ones are the ones we put on ourselves. And the best way to break them?" Martha smiled, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "Stop believing in them. Start believing in yourself instead." Years later, when travelers passed through their valley and asked about the woman who'd helped bring down the territorial corruption ring, they heard stories of courage and determination. But the people who knew Martha and Joseph best told a different story, about two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chose to build something bright together. The ranch prospered, becoming a symbol of what was possible when people refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on them. Martha never bore children, but she and Joseph raised dozens of young people who found their way to the valley. Apache youth learning to navigate between two worlds, Mexican children whose families had been displaced by violence, even white settlers' kids who needed to learn that strength came in many forms. The curse that had once defined Martha's life became just another story, told around campfires as an example of how fear could be weaponized against the innocent. But the real story, the one that mattered, was about a woman who'd learned to fight for her own life, and a man who'd understood that love meant standing beside someone as they found their strength. And in the end, that was the only legacy that mattered. Not sons to carry on a name, but the knowledge that they'd helped others find the courage to choose their own paths, to break their own curses, to build their own homes in a world that often seemed determined to tear them down. The land was indeed big enough for all kinds of love, all kinds of courage, all kinds of people willing to fight for the right to choose their own destinies. And in their small corner of that vast territory, Martha and Joseph had proven that sometimes the most powerful magic is simply refusing to accept that you're powerless. As the stars wheeled overhead and the desert wind carried the scent of sage and possibility, Martha, running bare, slept peacefully in the home she'd chosen, beside the man who'd seen her strength when the world saw only weakness. The curse was broken, not by magic or miracles, but by the simple revolutionary act of choosing to believe in herself. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. Thank you for joining us on Martha and Joseph's incredible journey from fear to freedom, from curse to courage. Their story reminds us that sometimes the labels others place on us say more about their fears than our reality. If this tale of resilience and love inspired you, please subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We have so many more powerful stories waiting to be told. Comment below and share what part of Martha's transformation resonated most with you. Did you see yourself in her struggle? What curses in your own life might be ready to break? Don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear that they have the power to rewrite their own story. Your support helps us continue bringing these tales of human triumph to light. Until next time, remember, you are never as powerless as others might want you to believe.